The shelter was loud. The sound of barking dogs echoed off the metal walls, a constant, desperate chorus of animals vying for attention. Some wagged their tails, pressing their noses against the cold bars, hopeful that today would be the day they found a home. Others jumped, whined, pawed at their cages, eager for anyone to notice them. But in the farthest corner, curled into the smallest space he could manage, a German shepherd remained completely still. Unlike the others, he didn't bark. He didn't jump. He didn't try to make eye contact. He existed in silence, his body pressed against the concrete wall as if he wished he could disappear into it. Every sharp noise, a barking dog, a door slamming, a set of keys jingling, made him flinch. His ears pinned back, his body trembling. His eyes remained low, never meeting the gaze of anyone passing by. Most people didn't even see him. Potential adopters walked by his cage, their eyes drawn to the friendly, eager dogs wagging their tails, pleading for attention. They didn't stop for the German shepherd. To them, he was invisible. But Emily noticed. She had been walking through the shelter, scanning the kennels, when something pulled her toward him. Maybe it was the way he made himself as small as possible. Maybe it was the way his eyes, though lowered, held something she couldn't quite explain. Pain. Fear. Loneliness. She stepped closer, kneeling in front of his kennel, ignoring the loud barks of the dogs around her. The German shepherd didn't react. He didn't lift his head. He didn't acknowledge her presence. Emily's heart squeezed. She turned toward the nearest shelter worker, her voice soft but firm. "What's his story?" The woman sighed, checking the clipboard hanging outside the kennel. "Came in a few weeks ago. He was found abandoned on a property, probably left there for years." Emily frowned. "Was he abused?" The worker hesitated before nodding. "We don't know the full story, but it's clear he's never known kindness." Emily looked back at the shepherd. His ribs were faintly visible beneath his fur. His coat was dull, slightly unkempt, though the shelter had tried to clean him up. But what stood out the most was his body language. Every muscle was tight. His breathing was shallow. This wasn't just fear. This was a dog who had never felt safe. Emily took a slow breath and scooted a little closer, pressing her palm flat against the cage. No sudden movements. No loud noises. She simply waited. Minutes passed. The shepherd remained still. But then, for the briefest moment, he flicked his eyes toward her. It lasted only a second before he quickly looked away again. But Emily saw it. And in that moment, she made a decision. She wasn't walking away. This dog needed someone willing to be patient. Someone who wouldn't expect him to trust overnight. Someone who would show him that the world wasn't all pain and fear. And Emily knew, deep down, that person was going to be her. She stood up and turned to the worker. "I want to meet him." The woman gave her a hesitant look. "Are you sure?" "He won't interact." "We've tried." "I don't need him to interact," Emily said. "I just need him to know I'm here." The worker sighed but nodded, unlocking the kennel door. Emily stepped inside slowly, careful not to invade his space. The shepherd's body tensed. His ears flattened even more, his tail curling tightly around himself. Emily didn't move closer. She lowered herself to the ground, sitting across from him, keeping a safe distance. Then, she just sat there. Minutes passed. Other dogs barked, shelter workers walked by, but Emily never moved. The shepherd stayed curled in his corner, but he didn't look away this time. He watched her. Emily smiled gently. This was enough. For now. She knew trust wasn't built in a day. But this was the first step. And she was willing to take every single one. Emily knelt in front of the kennel, her hands resting gently on her knees. She kept her movements slow, careful not to startle the terrified German shepherd curled in the farthest corner. She had seen fearful dogs before, but not like this. This wasn't just a dog who had been abandoned. This was a dog who had learned that humans meant pain. His body was pressed so tightly against the cold wall that it was as if he were trying to disappear into it. His head remained low, ears flattened against his skull. His breathing was shallow, his ribs barely rising and falling. Most heartbreaking of all, he wouldn't even look at her. Emily had been at the shelter long enough to know that dogs like him were the least likely to get adopted. People wanted pets that wagged their tails, dogs that jumped up excitedly at the sight of a new person. No one wanted the broken ones. She exhaled softly. "Hey, buddy," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The German Shepherd gave no sign that he heard her. He didn't lift his head. Didn't even flick an ear. But Emily saw the way his muscles tensed ever so slightly. He was listening. She inched just a little closer to the kennel bars, her heart aching for him. For a few moments, she simply sat there, letting him get used to her presence. Other dogs barked, tails wagging as families walked by. A couple nearby cooed over a young Labrador mix, already discussing names. But Emily stayed focused on the shepherd. Slowly, carefully, she reached out, just enough to slip her fingers through the kennel bars. That's when it happened. The German Shepherd flinched violently, his whole body jerking as if she had struck him. Emily's heart cracked. He pressed himself further into the corner, his breath coming in rapid, shallow pants. His entire body was trembling now, his eyes still locked on the floor, too afraid to look up. The reaction was instant. Pure, unfiltered fear. Emily pulled her hand back immediately, her eyes stinging. How much had this dog endured? How many times had a hand reached for him only to bring pain instead of comfort? She swallowed hard. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, more to herself than to him. A voice behind her made her turn. A shelter worker stood nearby, her arms crossed. "We've tried everything," she said with a sad shake of her head. "He's been here for weeks, and he's just shut down." Emily's fingers tightened in her lap. "He's not aggressive," she pointed out. "No," the worker admitted. "He's not. He's just gone." Emily turned back to the dog. Gone. She didn't believe that. Somewhere inside this terrified creature was a soul that had held on despite everything. The worker sighed. "He may never trust anyone, Emily." But Emily wasn't listening anymore. Because at that exact moment, the shepherd moved. It was small. So small, in fact, that anyone else would have missed it. His paw shifted. Not away. Toward her. Emily held her breath, her heart pounding. She didn't reach out again. Didn't push. Instead, she waited. A long silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, cautiously, he lifted his eyes. Just for a second. Barely a flicker of movement. But it was there. Emily felt something warm bloom in her chest. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But it was a start. And she wasn't giving up. She stayed kneeling outside the kennel, her fingers still curled gently in her lap. The shelter noise faded into the background as she focused solely on the trembling shepherd in front of her. Every instinct told her not to move too fast, not to reach out again. So she just sat there. Minutes passed. A worker walked by, glancing at her with quiet curiosity, but didn't interrupt. They had seen people try before, seen them give up after a few minutes when the dog didn't react. But Emily was different. She could see something in him. A flicker of a soul that had once been full of life. A small, hidden part of him that hadn't completely given up. And she was going to reach it. But it had to be on his terms. The German Shepherd kept his eyes on the floor, but he no longer seemed as stiff. His breathing, though still shallow, wasn't as ragged as before. Emily took a slow breath and let her voice soften even more. "I don't know what happened to you," she murmured, "but I know one thing. You don't have to be afraid anymore." No response. No movement. But she saw the tiniest flick of an ear, a slight shift in the way his paws were tucked beneath him. He was listening. That was enough. For now. She wasn't expecting him to crawl into her arms overnight. She wasn't expecting him to trust her today, tomorrow, or even next week. But what she was expecting, what she knew, deep in her heart, was that she could be the first person to show him what kindness felt like. And she wasn't going to stop trying. Emily stood slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. She gave him one last look before whispering, "I'll see you tomorrow." Then she walked away. And for the first time since he had arrived at the shelter, the shepherd lifted his head and watched her go. Emily returned the next day. And the next. And the next. Each morning, as soon as the shelter doors opened, she made her way to his kennel, ignoring the excited barks of the other dogs. Some jumped at the bars, tails wagging, hoping for attention. Others whimpered, pawing at the cages, desperate for a home. But he was always the same. Silent. Still. Pressed into the corner. She never rushed him. She never reached out again. She just sat there. At first, he didn't react at all. His head stayed down, his body curled tight, as if he believed he could disappear into the cold concrete. But after a few days, Emily noticed something different. He still didn't move toward her. He still wouldn't meet her gaze. But the shaking? It had stopped. It wasn't much. But to Emily, it was everything. It meant he was learning, slowly, that she wasn't there to hurt him. So she kept coming. She came on rainy days, when the shelter smelled of damp fur and wet pavement. She came on busy days, when families crowded the hallways, choosing dogs to take home. She came on quiet days, when the only sounds were the occasional sighs of the tired, waiting animals. And every time, she sat in the same spot, her back against the cold metal bars, her voice soft and steady. She talked to him about anything. Her favorite books. The weather. How her morning coffee had been too bitter. None of it mattered. What mattered was consistency. What mattered was showing up. Days turned into a week. And still, he stayed curled in his corner. Still, he refused to meet her eyes. Still, he remained trapped in whatever fear had been burned into him before he came here. But Emily had patience. She didn't expect him to change overnight. And then, one afternoon, something happened. She was talking like always, her voice a gentle hum in the otherwise noisy shelter. She didn't expect anything different from the day before. But then, a movement. Subtle. Barely there. But she saw it. His head lifted. Not much, just a fraction of an inch. His ears twitched at the sound of her voice. For the first time, he was listening. Emily's heart pounded. She didn't react. Didn't gasp or move closer. She let him have his moment. She just kept talking, as if nothing had changed. But inside, she knew. Something had. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But for the first time since she had met him, he saw her. And for now, that was enough. The next morning, Emily arrived early, the usual anticipation settling in her chest. Would he react again? Would he acknowledge her presence? She approached his kennel, kneeling in the same spot she had for days, keeping her voice soft and steady. "Good morning, buddy," she murmured. "I hope you got some rest." Silence. No movement. Then, a flick of an ear. Her breath hitched, but she forced herself to stay calm. She didn't move closer, didn't change her tone. She just kept talking. "Guess what? I had the worst coffee this morning. You wouldn't believe it. It was so bitter, I thought I was drinking burnt wood." "Nothing." Emily sighed, leaning back slightly. She knew this wouldn't be easy. Trust was earned, not given. Still, she had hoped. She closed her eyes for a brief second, gathering her thoughts. And when she opened them, he was looking at her. Her heart nearly stopped. It was small. Barely noticeable. but his deep brown eyes had lifted just slightly, meeting hers for the first time. A second later, he looked away again, curling his body tighter. But Emily had seen it. And that was everything. She smiled, warmth blooming in her chest. "I'll see you tomorrow," she whispered. And for the first time, she left the shelter knowing she was getting through to him. Emily sat in her usual spot, cross-legged outside the kennel, her hands resting in her lap. The German Shepherd was in his corner, just as he always was, but something was different. For the past few days, he had been looking at her. Not often. Not for long. But each time, it lasted a second longer. He no longer flinched at every tiny sound. He no longer trembled when she spoke. And today, Emily was ready to take the next step. She took a slow breath, then carefully extended her hand, palm up, fingers relaxed. She didn't reach for him. She didn't push. She simply let it be his choice. The shepherd's ears twitched at the movement. His eyes flickered to her hand, then back to the ground. He didn't run, but he didn't move closer either. Emily stayed perfectly still. Her fingers remained outstretched, inches away from where he sat. Seconds passed. Then minutes. Her arms started to ache, but she refused to pull back. This had to be his decision. The shepherd's chest rose and fell in slow, steady breaths. He was thinking. Deciding. Then, his paw shifted. Emily's breath caught. It was the smallest movement. Barely an inch forward. But it was a step. A choice. She didn't move, didn't react. She just let him take his time. Another minute passed. Another slow breath. And then, he took another step. Emily's heart pounded, but she kept her body relaxed. Closer. Then closer still. And then, after what felt like forever, he was right in front of her. His nose twitched, his eyes locked on her open palm. Emily didn't move a muscle. She could feel the warmth of his breath against her fingers. And then, he did it. He touched her hand. Just a quick, barely there graze of his wet nose. Emily held in a gasp, forcing herself to remain calm. It was fleeting, so quick that anyone else would have missed it. But she didn't. She felt it. The moment he chose to trust her. The shepherd didn't pull away. He stayed. His body was tense, his muscles tight, but he didn't retreat to his corner. And Emily knew this was everything. Slowly, carefully, she curled her fingers and brushed them gently against his fur. His whole body shuddered at the touch. Not from pain. Not from fear. But from something he had never known before. Kindness. For the first time in his life, a hand had reached out to him and hadn't hurt him. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. She wanted to say something, but no words felt right. So she just sat there, her hand resting lightly against his fur, waiting. And for the first time since he had arrived at the shelter, he didn't pull away. The shelter was buzzing with excitement. For weeks, the German Shepherd had been the dog no one thought would ever open up. But now? He was different. He wasn't fixed in his corner, frozen with fear. He wasn't trembling when people passed by his kennel. He had let Emily touch him. And that changed everything. The staff watched in disbelief as Emily sat outside his kennel, her hand resting gently against the bars. He wasn't curled up in fear anymore. He was still cautious, still hesitant, but he was watching her. "He's a completely different dog," one of the workers whispered. Emily smiled, rubbing her thumb along the metal bars. "Not different," she corrected. "He was always there. He just needed time." A silence settled between them, the kind that carried an unspoken truth. Emily had already made up her mind. "I want to adopt him," she said. The worker hesitated. "Are you sure?" "He's made progress, but..." "I'm sure." Emily's voice was steady. She looked at the shepherd, her heart full. "I can't leave him here. He deserves a home." The worker sighed but nodded. All right. Let's get the paperwork started. Emily signed the forms without a second thought. But when the time came to take him out of the kennel, fear returned. The moment the worker clipped the leash onto his collar, his body locked up. His ears pinned back, his tail tucked so tightly it nearly disappeared beneath him. His entire frame trembled, his legs stiff and unmoving. Emily's heart clenched. To him, a leash had never meant freedom. It had meant control. It meant fear. The worker gave a sympathetic sigh. This is why we were worried, she murmured. Some dogs freeze up like this when they've had a rough past. Emily knelt down, keeping her voice soft. Hey, buddy, she whispered. You're okay. The shepherd's chest rose and fell in rapid breaths. He didn't believe her. He had only just learned to trust her touch, but this was different. This was leaving. And that was terrifying. Emily didn't pull on the leash. Didn't force him forward. Instead, she simply sat down. Minutes passed. The shepherd remained frozen, eyes darting around the shelter as if searching for an escape. Emily stayed patient. She didn't rush him. Didn't demand anything from him. She just waited. She let the leash remain loose, showing him that it wasn't something to fear. The other shelter dogs barked, tails wagging as people passed by, but Emily and the shepherd sat in their own quiet space. After a few moments, she gently patted the floor beside her. Come on, buddy, she whispered. Let's go home. The shepherd's ears twitched. But he didn't move. A worker approached and offered to help, but Emily held up a hand. He has to do this on his own, she said. So she waited some more. And then, after what felt like an eternity, he took a step forward. It was small. Hesitant. But it was a step toward freedom. Emily smiled, tears stinging her eyes. She gave him time, letting him take another step, then another. Every movement was cautious, every shift uncertain, but he was walking toward something new. And for the first time, he was walking toward a new life. Emily pulled into her driveway and shut off the engine. She glanced at the German shepherd sitting stiffly in the passenger seat. His body was rigid, his eyes darting from the car door to the unfamiliar surroundings outside. The hardest part wasn't getting him out of the shelter. It was showing him he was safe now. Emily stepped out first, moving slowly so she wouldn't startle him. She walked around the car and opened the passenger door, giving him the option to come out on his own. But he didn't move. His ears flicked back. His muscles tensed. He was waiting for something bad to happen. Emily crouched down, keeping her voice soft. It's okay, she murmured. This is your home now. The shepherd didn't respond. Minutes passed. Finally, after much hesitation, he inched forward. His paws touched the ground, but the moment he was outside, he bolted for the nearest corner, pressing himself against the wall of the house. Emily's chest ached. She didn't try to stop him. She didn't rush him inside. She just let him be. After some time, she walked toward the front door, holding it open. She didn't call him. Didn't tug on the leash. She waited. And after a long silence, he stepped inside. Once inside, the dog made himself as small as possible. Emily had set up a soft dog bed near the couch, a bowl of fresh water, and food nearby. But he ignored it all. Instead, he found the nearest crate in the corner of the room and curled up inside. Emily frowned. She hadn't planned on creating him. She wanted him to have freedom. But to him, the crate wasn't a cage. It was the only place he felt safe. She sighed and let him have his space. That night, Emily moved through her usual routine, cooking dinner, cleaning up, occasionally glancing toward the crate. The shepherd watched her the entire time. Not in curiosity. Not in excitement. But in fear. His eyes followed her every move, his body tense, like he was waiting for something to go wrong. Emily's heart broke. He wanted to trust her. But he didn't know how. She placed a bowl of food near the crate, stepping back to give him space. He didn't move. Minutes passed. Emily turned away, pretending to focus on something else. Only then, when he thought she wasn't looking, did he hesitantly creep forward and eat. She exhaled softly. It would take time. That night, Emily lay in bed, listening to the quiet sounds of her home. She glanced toward the crate one last time. The German Shepherd was curled in a tight ball, his body trembling, even in sleep. The fear had followed him home. But now, he wasn't facing it alone. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Emily sat on the couch, a book open in her lap, but she wasn't really reading. Her eyes moved over the words, but nothing stuck. Her mind was on him. The German Shepherd was still in his crate, where he had been for days. He barely left it except to eat, and even then, only when he thought she wasn't looking. He watched her constantly, his deep brown eyes following her every move. Not with curiosity, not with comfort, but with caution. He wanted to trust her. She could see it in the way his ears twitched when she spoke, in the way his gaze lingered for just a second longer each day. But he didn't know how. Emily sighed, rubbing a hand over her face. Would he ever let his guard down? She didn't need him to love her overnight. She just wanted him to feel safe. She turned another page, though she hadn't absorbed a single word. And then, she felt it. A soft, warm pressure against the back of her hand. Emily's breath caught. Slowly, her eyes drifted downward. The shepherd was standing beside her. His head was low, ears pinned back, but he had made the choice. He had come to her. Emily didn't move. Didn't speak. She didn't want to scare him away. She just let him be there. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, ever so hesitantly, the dog pressed his nose against her fingers again. Emily's throat tightened. This wasn't excitement. This wasn't full trust. But it was something. Her fingers twitched, aching to reach out, to run her hand gently over his fur, to give him the comfort he had never known. But she knew better. This moment wasn't about her. It was about him. So she didn't move. She simply let him take his first step toward trust. And for the first time since bringing him home, she felt hope. Change didn't happen all at once. It was slow. Subtle. But it was there. The German Shepherd still moved cautiously, still hesitated before stepping into the open, but he watched Emily more now. When she spoke, his ears flicked ever so slightly. When she walked through the house, his eyes followed, not with fear, but with curiosity. He was learning. One morning, as Emily brewed her coffee, she glanced toward his crate. He wasn't inside. Instead, he was lying near the doorway, closer than ever before. Emily smiled but didn't react. She knew this was his way of testing the waters. So she let him. She continued with her morning routine, acting as if nothing had changed. But inside? Her heart was soaring. Each day, the small moments stacked on top of each other. One evening, as she sat on the couch, she reached out as she always did, slowly, carefully, never expecting anything. And this time? He didn't flinch. Emily held her breath, letting her fingers barely brush against his fur. His body was still stiff, still unsure. But he didn't pull away. It was the first time he had chosen to stay. The next day, she tried again. And that time, he sighed, a soft, barely audible breath, but one that spoke volumes. The kind of sigh that meant relief. The kind of sigh that meant he was starting to believe he was safe. Emily felt her throat tighten. For so long, fear had been all he knew. But now? He was learning, slowly, cautiously, that love wasn't something to be feared. And for the first time in his life, he was letting himself feel it. Emily pulled into the driveway, shutting off the engine with a tired sigh. It had been a long day, but her thoughts immediately drifted to him. Would he still be curled up in his crate? Would he watch her from a distance like he always did? She grabbed her bag and unlocked the front door, stepping inside. Then, she froze. He was there. Standing in the hallway. Waiting for her. Her breath caught. This had never happened before. For weeks, he had hidden when she came home. He had always watched from afar, uncertain, afraid. But today, he had made the choice. Emily stood perfectly still, afraid to break the moment. And then, his tail wagged. Just once. A small, hesitant flick. Emily felt her chest tighten, her vision blur. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. It was so small, so quick, but it meant everything. He wasn't just tolerating her presence anymore. He was happy to see her. A soft sob escaped her lips as she smiled. "Hey, buddy," she whispered. "I missed you too." He didn't flinch. Didn't retreat. He just stood there, ears slightly perked, eyes steady. For the first time since she had met him, he finally felt safe. How many dogs like him are still waiting? Sitting in shelters. Hiding in the back of their kennels, too afraid to hope. Some never get the chance to feel a gentle hand. Some never learn what it means to be safe. But not every dog is broken, some just need someone to believe in them. Lucky had spent his life in fear, expecting nothing but pain. But someone saw him. Someone gave him time. Someone refused to give up on him. And now? He isn't hiding anymore. He isn't trembling. He isn't waiting for something bad to happen. He has a home. He has love. He has a second chance. As Emily sits on the couch, Lucky curls up beside her, resting his head in her lap. For the first time in his life, he isn't just surviving. He is loved. Right now, there are thousands of dogs just like Lucky. Waiting. Hoping. Afraid. They don't need perfection. They don't need someone with all the answers. They just need someone willing to try. If you can, adopt. If you can't, foster. If nothing else, support rescues and shelters that give dogs like Lucky a second chance. Because no dog should have to wait forever.